Okay, so I think it's good we start with Surah Al-Fatiha. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين صدق الله العلي العظيم. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعن الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين آمين يا رب العالمين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك، عليكم منا جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعل الله آخر الأحد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Peace be upon you, O Abu Abdullah, and upon the souls who have gathered in your courtyard. Upon you, from us all, is the peace of God forever, for as long as we remain and as long as night and day endure. And may God never make this our last pledge to visit you. Peace be upon Husayn, and upon Ali, the son of Husayn, and upon the children of Husayn, and upon the companions of Husayn. Please give me a salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So this is the fourth in our series of sessions for the nights of Ashura and Arba'een on the subject of Tabyeen or clarification. As with all of our other sessions, such as those on patience, the lantern of the path, or the art of supplication, it is strongly recommended that anyone consuming this at the very least review the previous sessions prior to consuming this one. This is because of the nature of the discussion, the manner of the discourse really does require that each part build upon the ones that came before, so as to avoid confusion, misunderstanding, and any invalid assumptions. Some invalid assumptions that can lead to what would really be the antithesis of Tabyeen or clarification. While we do have a recap for each session, the recap is very summarized, and to get the full nuance, the previous session really does need to be consumed, studied, and reflected upon. Nevertheless, if I can get a loud salawat, we can move on to the recap.
اللهم صل على محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرج.
So, in the third session, in the previous session rather, of our ongoing exploration of Tabyeen or clarification, we examined how this sacred duty moves beyond rhetoric and becomes the very foundation of a believing society's moral resilience, political clarity, and spiritual vitality. Clarification was presented not simply as an intellectual exercise, but as a civilizational trust and amana that connects past prophet missions with present-day responsibility. We saw how clarification elevates discourse from mere speech to public consciousness, becoming a force that gives shape to national will and safeguards collective identity. Through Quranic injunctions, the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt, and the lived examples of revolution and reform, we explored how truth must not only be known, but explained with precision, patience, and presence. We studied the culture of mutual advice, or nasiha, as a divine safeguard against disintegration and despair. And we affirmed that divine concepts like Tawheed, Wilaya, Ubudiyya, and Jihad, that is, the unity of God, guardianship, servitude, and struggle, must be operationalized. They must be made tangible in life, governance, and society, not left as mere abstractions. Clarification in this light becomes the bridge between revelation and reality. Historical exemplars were examined in depth. The prophets were described as awakeners of intellect and spirit. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him and his family, was portrayed as the voice of uncompromising truth in an age of ignorance. And Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali, peace be upon him, was revealed as the clarifier par excellence, whose sermons and governance dismantled sedition and preserved divine values. We also explored the clarifying jihad of the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt, the courageous stand of Sayyidah Zainab and Imam Sajjad, peace and blessings be upon them, after Karbala, and the unshakable insight of companions such as Ammar ibn Yasir. These were not passive voices, but divine instruments of clarity in times of great distortion. Contemporary examples were also discussed, from Imam Khomeini's revolutionary articulation of Islamic governance to the luminous clarity and sacrifice of scholars like Shahid Madani and Shahid Mutahari and Shahid Beheshti. Each showed that in every age, clarification is the condition for revival, and silence is its betrayal. The session concluded by reminding us that the jihad of clarification is not limited to scholars or martyrs alone. Rather, it extends to every believer, whether by word, by deed, by presence, or by resistance. We each carry the obligation to clarify, to protect hearts from distortion, society from fragmentation, and truth from erasure. Now, as we turn to part 4, we will explore the requirements of clarification, the moral, intellectual, and spiritual conditions without which this sacred trust cannot be fulfilled. What are the attributes needed for one to clarify rightly? What inner foundations must be built for this outward task to bear fruit? These are the questions that will guide us going forward. Please give me a salawat and we move on to the requirements of clarification.
اللهم صل على محمد
اللهم صل على
وآل
محمد
محمد.
وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
So the first most important point is that clarification must align with revolutionary leadership. One of the foundational requirements for any serious social or ideological movement is that its adherents, particularly those engaged in the struggle for truth, operate in synchrony with the leadership of the divine movement. Just as a soldier requires orders from the commander to act with purpose, so too must a sincere mujahid in the field of clarification anchor their efforts to the guidance of the righteous leadership. This alignment is not symbolic, it is operational. Every initiative undertaken in the jihad of clarification must consciously reflect and amplify the strategic vision articulated by the rightful leader of the movement. The objectives of such a leader are not personal, political, or factional. They are rooted in divine truth and oriented towards establishing a just and God-conscious civilization. Therefore, any effort to analyze or respond to the challenges of the time must be conducted with direct reference to the leadership, the statements, strategies, and clarifications issued by the guide of the Islamic movement must serve as the compass for those who wish to partake in this sacred task of clarification. To move in any direction divorced from this axis is to risk fragmentation, misdirection, and the dilution of divine purpose. So now we look at the conditions for a sound movement: unity, direction, and hope. The movement of clarification must be characterized by logic, popular engagement, and above all, discipline. Mere enthusiasm or popular sentiment without structure or coherence is insufficient. A movement gains value when it is purposeful, principled, and rightly ordered, not chaotic or reactionary. 3 essential conditions must be present for such a movement to succeed. The first one is unity of understanding and recognition of the arena. Those who serve as the vanguard of this movement, whether organizers, motivators, or intellectuals, must possess a precise and unified understanding of the landscape in which they operate. One cannot struggle effectively without recognizing the terrain, identifying the true adversary, and discerning the forces at play. A society engaged in the struggle for truth must understand its present condition, the ideological and material threats it faces, the opportunities available to it, and the nature of its allies and enemies. Clarity in assessing these elements is a prerequisite for principled action. A divine trajectory towards Islamic civilization. A movement without destination is bound to meander and dissipate. Therefore, the struggle for clarification must articulate a clear and logical path forward, one that can be presented convincingly to the public. The goal is not merely to resist injustice or expose falsehoods, but to build, to establish a society rooted in divine values, governed by justice and oriented towards the pleasure of God. This trajectory must ultimately lead towards the formation of a God-conscious society and the emergence of a flourishing Islamic civilization. Every act of clarification, therefore, must contribute directly or indirectly to the construction of such a future. Thirdly, the spirit of hope and confidence in divine capacity. No movement can endure without hope. This is not mere emotional optimism, but a rational and spiritual conviction that victory is possible, indeed inevitable, if the divine path is upheld. This hope is anchored in tangible realities as well as spiritual truths. History itself bears witness to the capacities of believing nations. They have overturned tyrannies, established systems rooted in divine justice, and carried immense burdens with patience and faith. These are not distant legends, but living realities. Such miracles, whether the founding of an Islamic movement in a hostile global order, or the preservation of divine principles across generations, point to the presence of an enduring capacity within the faithful. Moreover, the adversaries of truth are not in a state of ascendancy. Rather, they are exhausted. The decline of materialistic civilization is evident to even their own thinkers. The modern world stands, as the Quran says, on the brink of collapse of a collapsing bank, which collapses with him into the fire of hell. This is from Quran, Surah At-Tawbah, the chapter of repentance, 9th chapter of the Quran, verse number 109, where Allah says, "Is he who founds his edifice on God-wariness and his pleasure better, or he who founds his building on the brink of a collapsing bank, which collapses with him into the fire of hell?" Against this crumbling backdrop, believers are upheld by the unbreakable promise of their Lord. And this is from Surah Muhammad, the chapter of Prophet Muhammad, 47th chapter of the Quran, verse number 7, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, "If you help God, he will help you." As well as Surah An-Nisa, the chapter of the women, 4th chapter of the Quran, verse 122, where Allah says, "And who is truer in speech than God?" These divine assurances are not metaphorical. They are certainties rooted in spiritual law. Whoever aligns themselves with the cause of God, striving to build a society governed by his laws, will be aided by him. This is the third essential element: hope in the divine promise and the certainty of eventual victory. Please give me a salawat and we move to the subject of understanding the arena and the strategic vision.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه.
In order to engage in meaningful clarification, one must maintain a comprehensive view of the divine movement, its origins, trajectory, and purpose. It is easy to become distracted by particulars, to focus exclusively on short-term failures, political developments, or isolated events. But such a fragmented perspective risks obscuring the true path. Those who fail to see the broader picture may lose direction altogether. They may forget the destination, misinterpret the means, or abandon the cause entirely. Therefore, while it is necessary to pay attention to practical details and planning, indeed, no movement can function without them, these details must not eclipse the overarching vision. The movement towards divine civilization is a continuous and strategic project. It began with the revival of Tawheed, monotheism, and aims towards the full realization of God's justice upon the earth. Those engaged in clarification must constantly orient themselves by this long arc of purpose. This perspective alone allows one to place events in their proper context, respond proportionately, and preserve ideological clarity. In short, it is not sufficient to be informed about individual parts of the system. One must also understand the system as a whole. That whole provides context, meaning, and the direction by which the individual efforts may align with the divine objective. Faith, divine promise, and the laws of victory. The material world is governed not only by physical laws, but also by divine laws, spiritual principles which guide the fate of individuals, nations, and civilizations. These laws, known as the Sunan of God, are just as real as gravity or the motion of celestial bodies, though they are invisible to the eye of the materialists. In Quran, Surah Al-Ahzab, the chapter of the Confederates, 33rd chapter of the Quran, verse number 62, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, God's sunnah, God's precedent with those who passed away before, and you will never find any change in God's precedent, in God's sunnah. And also in Surah Al-Fath, the chapter of conquest, 48th chapter of the Quran, verse number 23, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, it is God's sunnah, God's precedent that has passed before, and you will never find any change in God's precedent. Just as fire burns only when the conditions for combustion are prepared, so too do the divine laws manifest when human beings prepare the ground, through sincerity, piety, effort, and unity. These are not metaphors. They are laws built into the structure of existence. The front opposing the divine path is vast and unified. It includes global oppressors, ideological enemies, militant factions, and all those who serve the forces of arrogance and transgression. From the architects of global injustice to the agents of religious distortion, the enemy presents a formidable coalition. Yet many falter at the sight of this unity, not because the enemy is invincible, but because they are unaware of the laws of God that govern ultimate victory. It is through these divine principles that truth prevails. The revolution triumphed over its enemies not through wealth or weapons, but because it aligned itself with these spiritual laws. And the same holds true today. If believers prepare themselves spiritually, intellectually, and organizationally, and act sincerely for God, then divine support will be guaranteed. In Quran, in Surah Al-Hajj, the chapter of the pilgrimage, 22nd chapter of the Quran, 40th verse, surely God will help those who help him. This is not an abstract promise. Whoever commits themselves, their wealth, time, energy, and thought, their existence, to serving the religion of God and striving for its flourishing, will not be left unaided. Divine assistance will accompany them, and they will taste victory in both form and meaning. This is not only a matter of faith, it is a reality borne out by experience. Let us now look at spiritual readiness and the role of piety. But before that, please give me a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل
اللهم صل على
محمد.
محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
For the movement of truth to endure, remain effective, and achieve its goals, it must be carried on the shoulders of individuals who are spiritually fortified. Those who engage in the struggle of clarification must transform themselves into beings of resilience, like tempered steel, through faith, insight, and purified actions. Faith is a priceless capital. Praise be to God, alhamdulillah. Many of those engaged in this struggle are raised in faithful households and possess a foundational belief. But this belief must not remain dormant. It must be activated through deeds and refined through the rejection of sin. Action purifies faith, and faith, when accompanied by action, becomes more deeply rooted and luminous with each passing day. Special attention must be paid to the sins rooted in the ego, particularly those that involve harming others. These include oppressive behaviors, hurtful speech, backbiting, and unjust assumptions. A believer must be so conscious of God that even their inner thoughts are held to account. Through this vigilance, their actions are purified, and in turn their hearts become vessels of deeper awareness. The Quran declares, and this is from Surah At-Talaq, the chapter of divorce, 65th chapter of the Quran, second verse. Whoever is wary of God, he shall make for him a way out of the adversities of the world and the hereafter. And also in Surah At-Taghabun, the chapter of mutual disposition, 64th chapter of the Quran, verse number 11. Whoever has faith in God, he guides his heart. Piety or taqwa is not merely a private virtue. Rather, it is a strategic necessity. It opens the door to divine guidance, strengthens resolve, protects the soul from corruption, and deepens understanding. In times of sedition, confusion, and ideological distortion, it is piety that allows the believer to perceive truth clearly, to speak it wisely, and to act upon it faithfully. Therefore, the foundations of every successful movement lie not only in planning or mobilization, but in the interior refinement of its members. The faithful must embody sincerity, vigilance, and restraint, for these are the spiritual preconditions of divine support. Ethics in speech and action, the prophetic standard. Islamic etiquette, particularly in speech, must be safeguarded, expanded, and exemplified by those who engage in the struggle for truth. In today's world, especially with the rise of online platforms and digital media, foul language and indecent expression have become commonplace. This erosion of manners must be addressed, not merely by criticism, but through the example set by those who represent divine values. The followers of the Ahlul Bayt, peace and blessings be upon them, are called to a higher standard, the standard of prophetic and infallible ethics. The Alawi and Fatimi school of thought is a school of dignity, clarity, and truth, not slander or vulgarity. Even when raising objections or expressing dissatisfaction with grave injustices, the tone and content must remain upright. Consider the example of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, peace and blessings be upon her. She delivered two powerful and eloquent sermons, one in the mosque before a large male audience, and one to the women of Medina. Both were impassioned protests against grave violations of divine trust. Yet not a single sentence of hers contained foul speech or insult. Every word was precise, weighty, and noble, conveying profound truths with unshakable dignity. This is the prophetic standard. Our words must be imbued with knowledge, our tone with justice, and our manner with mercy. We must reject backbiting, insults, and indecency, both in public and in private, whether on the tongue or on the screen. Even Imam Ali, peace and blessings be upon him, in the midst of battle, objected when some of his soldiers resorted to abusive language against the opposing army. He said, and this is from Nahj al-Balagha, and as with all of these sessions, the citations and footnotes are in the write-up. Indeed, I detest for you that you should be abusers of others. He did not condone immorality, even against those waging war against him. This is the ethical fabric of the divine movement, one that preserves honor, even in confrontation, and refines the soul through restraint. Let our gatherings, our discourse, and our online presence reflect this prophetic legacy. Let us be known not only for what we oppose, but for how we oppose it, with composure, eloquence, truth, and mercy. This is the ethical heritage we are entrusted to uphold. The ethics of disagreement and clarification versus slander. A critical responsibility for those involved in clarification is to maintain a firm ethical foundation. Even when confronting misguidance, injustice, or betrayal, the task we face is serious, weighty, and sacred. It demands that we not only speak the truth, but do so in a manner pleasing to God. At the heart of this responsibility is piety. Piety ensures our words are just, our intentions sincere, and our actions are free from corruption. If we act with piety, our clarification will be accurate, our efforts will be effective, and our message will reach its intended destination, without distortion or spiritual blemish. Without piety, even the most well-intentioned acts may become tools of division, arrogance, and oppression. Among those harmful tendencies that can afflict those engaged in public discourse is the personalization of disagreement. Instead of refuting an idea, one begins attacking individuals. Instead of clarifying truth, one starts to destroy reputations. This path is not only unproductive, it is immoral. It violates both reason and revelation. If a person believes that another is heading down a dangerous or misguided path, the proper response is not to vilify them by name, nor to ruin their reputation. The correct path is clarification, to articulate the truth clearly, and to expose falsehood by contrast. When the light is manifest, darkness is automatically revealed. There is no need to attack individuals in order to challenge an idea. This was the method of the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt, peace and blessings be upon them. The Islamic Revolution too was built on the foundation of clarifying realities, not slandering opponents. It is enough to show the truth with clarity and trust that God will guide the hearts of the people. Character assassination, name-calling, and excessive negativity are all rooted in arrogance and fear, not in divine guidance. They are also often laced with unintentional ghibah or backbiting, or buhtan, slander, both of which are condemned in the strongest terms. In Quran, in Surah An-Nur, the chapter of light, 24th chapter of the Quran, verse number 12, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, "When you first heard about it, why did not the faithful men and women think well of their folk?" This verse does not merely condemn slander, it condemns the readiness to believe it. The Quran holds each believer responsible for cultivating a disposition of goodwill and assuming the best of others, unless and until the truth is clearly established. If someone disagrees with another, let them argue the point, not attack the person. Resorting to character attacks is a failure of both ethics and strategy. It will never bring about true reform. The method of Islam is to clarify, not to disgrace, to enlighten, not to destroy. Let us now look at rumors, media responsibility, and trust in officials. In our pursuit of truth and reform, we must give priority to ethics over emotion and to justice over sensationalism. The environment of a believing society must be shaped by mutual trust, brotherhood, and good opinion, not by suspicion, accusation, or vilification. Sadly, it has become common in today's world, especially across newspapers, media outlets, and digital platforms especially, to spread accusations and negative assumptions without verification. This toxic atmosphere corrupts hearts, darkens the soul, and disrupts the unity of the Ummah. There is no harm if a sinner becomes aware of their sin, but to create an environment where suspicion, slander, and character attacks become the norm is profoundly dangerous. Accusation without evidence is not transparency, it is injustice. In Islamic courts, the principle is very clear. An accusation holds no weight unless proven. Only the words of the accuser against themselves can carry legal weight. Everything else requires verification. This is not only a legal point, it is an ethical principle and should extend into public speech and media behavior. The rise of modern media, blogs, and social networks has amplified this danger. People speak with confidence on matters they barely understand. They echo the narrative of hostile outlets, those who have no interest in truth and no love for the Islamic project, and imagine themselves to be righteous in doing so. This is not reform, it is participation in confusion. If an enemy claims a leader has failed, does that justify repeating it? If foreign media slanders a scholar or official, does that make it true? To relay such rumors, even if they turn out to be true, is a sin unless proper procedures of evidence and justice have been fulfilled. To repeat them without evidence or to speak of them without benefit is not only backbiting, it may become slander or bahtan, which is a far graver sin. To accuse an individual unjustly is evil. To accuse an entire movement or tarnish the reputation of a system rooted in divine law is far worse. These accusations, often made by those who fail to understand the system they criticize, do more harm to their speakers than to their intended targets. Let us then restore our discourse to the standard of Quran. Let us reject hearsay, verify our sources, and speak only when speaking is beneficial and just. Trust must be preserved, and where it is shaken, clarification must be made with adab, not aggression. Please give me a salawat and we move on to online etiquette and respectful engagement.
اللهم صل
اللهم
على
صل على
محمد
محمد وآل محمد
محمد.
وعجل فرجهم.
In our time, the digital realm has become a major arena for public discourse, for activism, and for influence. Yet it is also one of the most dangerous domains when it comes to the erosion of Islamic etiquette, or adab. In this space, individuals often feel emboldened to speak against one another harshly, carelessly, and without accountability. This is a crisis of ethics, and it demands not only regulatory action from officials, but sincere reform from within the people themselves. We must bind ourselves to the moral boundaries of Islam, online as well as offline. The standards of speech established by the Quran and the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him and his family, apply just as rigorously to a social media post as they do to a public speech or personal conversation. At the same time, it must not be that these words, calling for ethical discipline, are misused as tools to suppress or belittle the faithful youth who carry the flame of revolution. Those passionate, loyal, and spirited youth are not extremists to be reprimanded. They are sons and daughters of the movement. They are a trust. They must be embraced, encouraged, and supported, not sidelined or silenced. However, all of us, including the most devoted, must operate within the framework of Islamic manners and the law. The true face of the revolution is not one of disorder or insult. It is one of clarity, dignity, and justice. Law is not merely an administrative function, it is a moral boundary. To adhere to it, even when it is inconvenient, is to uphold the principles of divine order. And to violate it in the name of zeal is to betray the very ideals one seeks to serve. Those who claim the mantle of service to the divine movement must be models of humility, discipline, mercy, and lawful conduct. Let no one believe that ignoring decorum is a sign of revolutionary authenticity. On the contrary, the more one observes etiquette and order, the closer one is to the spirit of divine service. Let our presence in the public sphere, including the digital sphere, reflect this truth. Let our conduct inspire trust, our words heal wounds, and our behavior attract hearts. For such is the way of those who serve not merely a cause, but the cause of God. Now let's look at prioritizing what matters. Primary versus secondary focus. And this is a very important point. There is a clear distinction between sincere critique and destructive conduct. Demanding reform, voicing concerns, and holding institutions to account are not only permitted, they are encouraged within the Islamic tradition. However, exaggeration, baseless accusation, slander, and the spreading of rumors is unacceptable, both morally and strategically. We must learn to distinguish between necessary correction and counterproductive fault-finding. Not every disagreement warrants public condemnation. Not every mistake requires public spectacle. Not every criticism is free from sin. Wherever we have crossed the line in the past, we must seek forgiveness, renew our ethical commitment, and ensure that such behavior is not normalized through our silence or negligence. In this context, a major priority is maintaining focus. The enemies of divine truth are active. calculating, and persistent. They do not sleep. If we, the believers, become distracted, neglectful, or engrossed in matters of secondary importance, we leave ourselves open to attack. In Nahj al-Balagha, Imam Ali says, when the warrior sleeps, the enemy does not sleep. To maintain this wakefulness, we must be vigilant against being drawn into trivial distractions, whether by the media, public gossip, or ideological baiting. There are always those who benefit from confusion, those who aim to shift our attention from strategic priorities to petty disputes, from divine objectives to passing controversies. This is why we repeatedly urge the media, journalists, broadcasters. This is why Imam Khamenei has repeatedly urged the media, journalists, broadcasters, and online influencers to avoid introducing divisive and misleading content that clouds judgment and misdirects energy. The Ummah's mind must be focused, not fragmented. Its voice must be clear, not confused. And its path must be forwards, not sideways. Obedience to the law and the meaning of fire at will. We sometimes hear people say fire at will. Let's try and understand what this means. A believer's commitment to justice is tested not only by their ideals, but by their attitude towards the law, especially when it does not align with their personal preferences. When I say law over here, I mean Sharia, Islamic law. True discipline means upholding the law even when it is difficult, even when it seems contrary to one's own interests. Selective obedience, following the law when it benefits and rejecting it when it burdens, is not submission to divine order, it is servitude to the ego. It is for this reason that Imam Khamenei has insisted a flawed law is better than lawlessness. The legal system, even when imperfect, is the vessel through which the Ummah preserves its cohesion. It is a vessel through which the Ummah protects its rights and resolves its disputes. Without it, chaos reigns. This is especially relevant when reflecting on the concept of fire at will. This phrase has been misunderstood by some as a license for rebellion or disorder. In truth, it refers to a form of decentralized, voluntary cultural engagement. It is a call to initiative, not insubordination. It means that the people of insight, willpower, and cultural awareness must not wait passively for orders or approvals. They must rise and take action in the cultural field, identifying vulnerabilities, responding to ideological infiltration, and building righteous alternatives, all within the bounds of ethical conduct and cohesion, national cohesion. It does not mean spreading obscenity. It does not mean violating the law. And it certainly does not mean giving ammunition to the enemies of the movement by displaying unruly or unethical behavior. If anything, it demands greater sensitivity, greater responsibility, and greater self-restraint from those who act under this mandate. Among those most called to this responsibility are the faithful youth, the revolutionary forces, and those who care deeply for the spiritual direction of the community, of the nation. These individuals must hold themselves to the highest standard, embodying compassion, wisdom, discipline, and ethical consistency, so that no enemy finds a gap to exploit. This is the deeper meaning of fire at will. To act decisively for truth without needing permission, yet always within the boundaries of law, ethics, and spiritual responsibility. Let us now look at the role of the Basiji and revolutionary youth. Those who serve the divine cause in their daily lives, whether in public roles or unseen efforts, carry with them a sacred trust. Among the most cherished of these are the Basiji. And I'm not talking about just the Iranian definition of Basiji over here. I'm talking about the Islamic concept of Basiji. Individuals whose dedication to the Islamic movement is marked not only by courage, but by humility, manners, and lawful conduct. When it is said that a Basiji holds value, it doesn't refer to slogans or uniforms. Rather, it refers to a character. A Basiji must be a beacon of mercy, of composure, of discipline and humility. Their presence should uplift others. Their speech should bring calm. Their manners should reflect the school of the Prophet and his purified household. Now, there exists a misconception, one that we must dispel, that a Basiji is unruly, forceful, or indifferent to rules. Nothing could be further from the truth. The one who most respects the law, most upholds the regulations, and most embodies discipline is in reality more deserving of this title. For what is a Basiji if not someone who sacrifices more than others for the preservation of the divine system? Rules and orders are not burdens to be cast aside. They are the very infrastructure through which divine values are made manifest in a society. Those who are entrusted with representing the movement must show through their conduct that they are not only servants of a cause, but rather the examples of its principles. The value of such individuals lies not only in their skill or their energy, but in the feelings, the faith and sincerity they carry in their hearts. These qualities are an inexhaustible reservoir of strength. As long as the divine movement is fueled by these virtues, it shall remain unshaken. No enemy, regardless of rank or reach, can cause lasting harm to a system that is rooted in sincere hearts and righteous purpose. Let us now look into the idea of research, depth, and the obligation to learn before speaking. Returning back to this command to fire at will, the command is not an invitation to unrestrained opinion or baseless commentary. It is a call to thoughtful, informed, and morally grounded initiative, one that begins with knowledge, not impulse. Before one can clarify, one must first understand. This is a divine and rational principle. No one can guide others unless they themselves have been guided. No one can illuminate truth unless they have sought it with sincerity and rigor. Therefore, the path of clarification begins with a firm obligation to learn, to study, to research, and to reflect. Whatever knowledge we currently possess is but a speck compared to the vast oceans of truth that remain undiscovered. We must be humble before the enormity of what we do not yet know. Every time a sincere seeker opens a book, they encounter realities their heart had not yet absorbed, insights their tongue was not yet qualified to utter. What is our depth? What is our capacity? Have we earned the right to speak, or merely assumed it? This is not a disagreement from participation. It is a reminder that participation demands preparation. The believer must increase their study, deepen their contemplation, and refine their intellectual tools so that their voice becomes a vessel of truth rather than confusion. Indeed, it becomes obligatory upon those who wish to clarify to first understand what must be clarified. This is the spiritual and intellectual contract upon which Tabyeen is built. And once that clarity is attained, the responsibility to explain faithfully, wisely, and courageously becomes a sacred duty. Please give me a salawat and we move to the conclusion.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل.
So clarification is built on understanding. Clarification or tabyeen is not a matter of loudness, repetition, or reaction. It is a sacred responsibility that demands discernment, sincerity, and readiness. It is not simply to speak, but to speak what is true, in the right way, at the right time, for the right reason. The prerequisites for this are immense. Alignment with divine leadership, a comprehensive understanding of the arena, a defined trajectory towards Islamic civilization, and an unshakable spirit of hope rooted in God's promises. It requires spiritual preparation through piety, patience, and the refinement of intention. It requires ethical conduct, both in public and private speech. It demands that we restrain our tongues, we verify our words, and we abstain from defamation, even when it masquerades as critique. The revolution of clarification is not sustained by slogans. It is sustained by those who act with wisdom, those who build before they break, and who prioritize what matters. It is not enough to oppose falsehood. One must illuminate truth. It is not enough to expose corruption. One must embody virtue. This is the prophetic model. This is the path of Sayyidah Fatimah al-Zahra and Imam Ali, peace and blessings be upon them both, and of everyone who carried the banner of divine responsibility through history. And above all, Tabyeen, clarification, begins with understanding. One cannot clarify what one does not comprehend. One cannot guide while ignorant of the path. The duty to speak is always preceded by the duty to know, deeply, humbly, and constantly. To engage in clarification, then, is to commit oneself to a life of learning, of patience, of discipline, and trust in God. And if these are present, the words spoken, even if a few, will strike the heart of the matter and illuminate the path for others. Looking ahead, the deeper dimensions of clarification. The journey of Tabyeen, clarification, is far from complete. What we have explored thus far are the foundations, the structural and spiritual prerequisites that enable a believer to speak truth with integrity. Yet there remain further inequalities and practical disciplines that must shape the one who undertakes this duty. God willing, in the next session, we will delve deeper into these advanced dimensions. How to distinguish genuine clarification from its imitations, the importance of timing and insight, the necessity of courage without recklessness, and the delicate balance between principled firmness and emotional intelligence. We will reflect on how the voice of truth must remain free from agitation, commotion, and sedition, and how the clarifier must stay above the fray when engaging society with precision, patience, and creativity. By exploring the thoughts of Islamic revolutionary thinkers and the timeless ethical frameworks of our faith, we will continue building the complete profile of the one entrusted with the duty of clarification. May God guide us upon this path. Please give me a salawat and we move to the supplication eulogy.
اللهم صل على محمد
اللهم صل على
وآل
محمد
محمد.
وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
So this is for the fourth night of Muharram, and the title is Those Who Did Not Leave. In his name, the Lord of the martyrs and the truthful. O God, send your blessings upon Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. O God, when the earth grows dark with betrayal, when the faces of men are veiled in cowardice and fear, you raise a few who shine like suns. And so you did on that plain. You gathered around Husayn men and women who did not flinch, who did not waver, and who saw death and smiled. Oh, how I wish I had been with you, so I too would have attained that victory. Oh, my Lord, tonight we remember those whose names are written in blood and light. Habib ibn Mawahir, the childhood companion, whose beard was white, but whose sword was young with fury for your sake. Zuhair ibn Qayn, once hesitant, but when he chose completely. He said, by God, if I were to be killed and then burnt, and this were done to me 70 times, I would never leave you, O Husayn. Muslim ibn Awsaja, the elder, who trembled not in age but in love. With his final breath he called out, have I been true, O Husayn? And the Imam wept and said, yes, yes, you have. And there were others, men and women, the black, the white, and the Arab, the freed slave and the nobleman, from Kufa, from Basra, from Medina, and beyond. Their only bond, Husayn. Oh God, how can we speak of loyalty when our time tests us with lesser trials, and yet our feet stumble? They knew they would fall. They knew their blood would soak the sand, but they stayed. And on the eve of Ashura, when Husayn offered them release, they cried, if we were to die 1,000 deaths, we would still never leave you. What covenant is this? What love burns so purely? O Imam of our age, you who will raise the banner of Ya Litharat al-Husayn, O the avenger of Husayn, will we be among your companions as they were with him? Or will we hesitate? Will we delay? Will we make excuses? Make us of those who do not leave. Make us of the ones who do not sleep. Make us of the ones who do not forget. O God, make us of the companions of the Qa'im, just as you made the companions of Husayn the best of creation. And grant us abundant loyalty, firmness of our feet, and truthfulness in our pledge. Tonight, we remember those who did not run, who gave their blood for prayer to remain, who proved that victory is not in numbers, but in truth, and that truth does not retreat. Tonight, we weep for loyalty, and we ask, would we have stayed? Would we have stood? Would we have died smiling like they did? وآخر الدعوان أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.